Your host, Walt Disney.
In our first television show last year, we described to you our hopes and plans for a place called Disneyland. A few months ago, in a progress report, we showed you the actual start of construction. In our mail recently, a lot of you have shown interest in our progress. And so this week, just a matter of days away from the formal opening of Disneyland, we want to bring you up to date on what's been happening and let you share with us the joys and anxieties of our race against time. In this, our final report on building a Disneyland, I want to pay tribute to the many studio artists, craftsmen, and engineers whose untiring efforts helped bring this dream into a reality. Without their skills and imagination, Disneyland would not have been possible. And now, here's Winston Hibbler to take you on a behind-the-scenes tour of Disneyland.
Right from the start, we had our dreams pretty well in hand. And of course, the best starting point is the old reliable drawing board, that magical borderline where dreams cross over from the misty land of imagination into the modern world of reality. Once the ideas were laid out on the drawing board, we started to break them down into working parts. Creating a design is one thing, making it work mechanically, surely, safely is another. Our engineers pored over the sketches, analyzed the problems, and made the models. Little models, medium-sized models, and life-sized models. On our test stage, several of the planned rides were reproduced in full scale. Here's a test model of Peter Pan's famous pirate ship as it will swoop through the London skies, powered not by pixie dust, but by a sturdy monorail. Across the studio street, on the tank stage we'd built for the submarine in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, our monorail system went underwater. To properly control the action of the mechanical alligators and hippos that rise out of the water, we had to time the course and the speed of the boat exactly. Inside Stage 3, nearby, where only a little while back Davy Crockett was battling the soldiers of General Santa Anna, we started construction on a 105-foot American riverboat, the stern-wheeler Mark Twain. Since the deck slopes from one end to the other, each piece of wood had to be individually cut and fitted. To make sure it was completely authentic, we called in as supervisor a Mississippi riverboat captain who had spent a lifetime running just such a boat. Constructing such a large boat inside a building 50 miles from water caused a lot of raised eyebrows. But unlike the fellow who built a boat in his basement and couldn't get it out, we had a plan. If anyone happened to look into the windows of our staff shop next door, they might well wonder what kind of a business we were really in. Here the mechanical creatures for our Adventureland jungle were being given form. The sculptors and technicians who had built our giant squid for 20,000 Leagues were creating our plastic zoo. Now they'd turned their skill to smaller but no less exacting subjects. Many new plastic materials came to our aid in the creation of the jungle beast. To people our jungle world with lifelike natives, our craftsmen performed the most difficult of all molding processes, the actual duplication of the human body. A professional model of imposing physique was chosen and covered with plaster of Paris. In order to obtain a satisfactory mold and yet not endanger our subject, the plaster craftsman had to know the precise moment to pull it apart. The hero of the hour was our model. Although the plaster got warmer and warmer as it hardened, he remained under the circumstances cool and collected. On Stage 2, across the street, where a short while ago Captain Nemo held his captives in the submarine Nautilus, the whir of power machinery replaced the call of camera, action. For here, we were building 5/8 scale railroad cars to run on Disneyland's own narrow gauge line, the Disneyland in Santa Fe. When you board one of these coaches and circle the park on the 3/4 mile trip, you'll have an old-fashioned but easy riding view of all four realms of Disneyland. But Disneyland just wouldn't be complete without another type of train, Casey Jr., designed primarily for our younger visitors. Built to take steep hills like a roller coaster, it's one of the few trains engineered that will take a 40% grade in complete safety. On the studio back lot, wagon makers were reviving the nearly forgotten art of building stagecoaches, surreys, buggies, buckboards, and Conestoga wagons. These will provide transportation around the park and will, we hope, ease the age-old problem of aching feet. Close by, another craft was being revived, the art of the wheelwright. It takes a lot of skill and plenty of practice to heat a metal wheel rim to the exact temperature, then fit and cool it without scorching the wood. Of course, the traditional colleague of the wagon maker and the wheelwright is the harness maker. But we discovered this skill had well-nigh disappeared with high-button shoes. So, like other studio craftsmen, he had to teach himself an all-but-forgotten art. To pull our three-quarter scale stagecoaches, covered wagons, and horse-drawn streetcars, we needed scaled-down animals. Shetland ponies and Corsican donkeys were the answer. When they arrived from distant corners of the world, they took up quarters next to the harness shop. There weren't enough of them, so we went into the breeding farm business. But horses for Disneyland are of several breeds. For like Pinocchio, some are made of wood. Of course, we mean horses for the carousel. The problem of carving merry-go-round horses really stumped us. After many months of searching, we finally rounded up enough of the antique hand-carved type to fill our carousel and run 4 abreast. Altogether, they add up to 72. Then began a reconditioning process and a reshaping of the legs to make them all jumpers in keeping with our King Arthur design. Being forced to obtain them from several sources, we happily discovered they all had different faces. Each was a distinct individual. At Disneyland, fact and fantasy often go hand in hand. In a darkened corner of our test stage, an exact replica of the moon was being modeled. The moon that was to be the destination of our Tomorrowland rocket trip. Our studio sculptor was aided by Roger Hayward, a distinguished expert on astronomical matters. Close by, one of our studio artists was painting a miniature model of what was to be our cyclorama. When completed in full scale, it will be seen in Tomorrowland and will give the illusion of a panoramic view of America as seen from a space station, traveling in an orbit 500 miles above the Earth. The studio was becoming a little crowded now, and so to speed things up, we assigned some of the work to outside companies. In Wilmington, California, construction was going forward on 2 steam locomotives, vintage of 1900, probably the last of their type ever to be built in the United States. At a shipyard in nearby San Pedro, the wheels of progress rolled backwards to 1895. In the midst of the latest in shipbuilding equipment, and with the most modern methods, we were building the hull of our old-fashioned sternwheeler. In nearby Newport, we were building and assembling miniature Autopia racing cars. These will speed along the Tomorrowland Freeway. Specially designed and built with a frame of steel tubing and a fiberglass body, each of these cars will have its own 1-cylinder, 6.5 horsepower motor. A most difficult problem was to build them to fit the varying sizes of growing youngsters. We finally agreed on 2 gas pedals, a close one for the smaller children, and one more distant for the older type youngster, say the 16 to 60 variety. And to give it that authentic, real-life feeling, our freeway will be patrolled by miniature police cars. Near at hand in Costa Mesa, we were working on the Explorer's launches, destined to ply through many tropic waters on our exotic Adventureland voyage. Here, as in many other problems we encountered in building Disneyland, modern plastic materials came to the rescue. For these boats are molded of fiberglass. By using these latest boat-building techniques, we were able to make them sturdier and safer than with conventional materials. Back at the studio, the working models of our rides had been perfected, and we were well into construction on the real thing. Peter Pan's pirate ship needed only finishing touches to carry us over London, through the first star to the right, down the glide path of a moonbeam on your trip to Neverland. Mr. Toad's 1903 car of Wind in the Willows fame needed only wheels, its final paint job, and its electric motor to carry passengers on a careening ride through Toad Hall and the English countryside. Here the scenic backgrounds are being prepared by our studio artists. Over in the drapery department, feminine craftsmen joined in the finishing touches. Drapes for the stage of the old-time dance hall in Frontierland. Fireproof curtains made of spun glass for the restaurants. Old-fashioned striped awnings for Main Street. A canopy for the King Arthur Carousel. And 1,001 other things made of fabric needed to complete the job. On stage 3, the superstructure of the stern wheeler had now reached the assembly stage. As section after section was pulled into place, and the proud Mark Twain lifted its head higher and higher into the air, you could almost hear the faraway echo of the boat whistles. Now, this question as to whether or not we could get the boat out of the stage, well, we fooled nearly everyone, for it was designed to come apart in sections for shipping. By now, all over the studio, hammers and saws were quickly being replaced by paint and brushes, for the deadline was drawing near. The hurry up, paint up, finish up campaign began in earnest. Ever wonder how you paint a straight line on a round wheel? Well, here's how it's done. Like our many other projects, the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad was feeling the effects of the final push. It needed only a few letters of recommendation from a dozen sign painters and the installation of its trucks and a few other accessories to be ready for its trial run. At this point, we felt much like our friend the Beaver in the picture Lady and the Tramp. It's not so much the work as the doggone hauling. For now began the job of moving Disneyland to Disneyland. Few weeks, as far as we were concerned, all roads led to Disneyland. At Barham Boulevard, our trucks completed the first leg of the trip and turned onto the Hollywood Freeway. From here, straight on to Disneyland, it was a breeze. It's often said that the Los Angeles drivers are a hardy breed. They're used to almost everything. But when a man's missed his coffee and is late for work, A boxcar rolling down the freeway can be quite a surprise.